Good morning. I am going to call to order our scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Budget Subcommittee. Today we are meeting to discuss a Public Works budget presentation this morning. My name is Elizabeth Glidden, and I am the vice chair of this committee. And I'll just note that Councilmember Quincy, who is the chair of this committee, is at a speaking engagement on behalf of the city. And so we expect him to join us shortly. And I invite my colleagues as well. This is usually one of the most interesting and expected presentations for the budget process, as to hear about what is happening in Public Works. So I will turn things over to Mr. Cockey.
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. So this morning I'm going to be presenting the mayor's recommended 2015 budget for Public Works. We worked very closely with the mayor's office as well as the finance and the budget office on these recommendations, and I'm in support of the recommendations that are in front of you. I also have my entire executive staff here, so they can help answer questions that you may have. And I would suggest we have a lot of material to go through. It's a fairly long presentation. So I think it'd be best if you just ask questions as we go along, because we'll be moving from fund to fund. So it might be easier just to answer questions as we go along. The other thing I'm intending to do this morning is we're going through the budget. It will follow what's in the budget book. However, I'm also using this opportunity to explain to not just yourselves, but the public may be listening in about what Public Works does, the activities, how we're spending their dollars in Public Works. So the general outline of my presentation is to start out with some just general overviews of our funding, and then dive into the general fund, and then hit the enterprise, internal services, and capital fund programs. Just an important point I want to mention is the capital fund programs are programs that support capital delivery. It is not the capital request. So in the appendix we have both the CARS request as well as capital request, but this is more about our operating budget, and I was not intending to present on our capital requests today.
And Mr. Cockey, just a pause as you are continuing on. I'll let my colleagues know that I do have speaker management up if you desire to ask questions using speaker management, but I'll also be on the lookout if you're using your red tag. So as Mr. Cockey said, this is a long presentation. So if you have a question, it's probably best that you ask it as the moment is before you. So.
Right. Yeah, just on that, in Public Works, we actually operate out of 14 different funds. So it gets a little complex, but I think the presentation will simplify it and make it fairly understandable. This is our org chart. And the way we're organized in Public Works is we operate under 3 business lines. Our business administration business line is primarily about the department administration as well as fleet services. And then we have the utility business line, which is made up of our water treatment and distribution, our solid waste and recycling, and our surface water and sewers. Those are primarily enterprise funds. And then we have our transportation business line, which is transportation engineering, transportation maintenance and repair, traffic and parking services, and then I'll speak to a new division that I'm proposing referred to as transportation planning and programming. This is an overview of our entire operating expense budget. As you can see that the large portion of we've got $328.6 million proposed for 2015. The majority of that is in our enterprise funds. The special revenue fund that you see up there with 6.1, that's actually the DID, Downtown Improvement District, which is primarily pass-through dollars. And then the capital projects is, once again, that's associated with the support of capital project delivery. This is our proposed revenue budget. And once again, similar to the expense budget, you can see that the primary revenue stream coming into Public Works is associated with our enterprise funds. So let me start out with the general fund, and this will be just the overview. And we're going to, next couple slides are just going through the general fund program, general fund budget programs. I'll be going into each one of these specifically, but I wanted to give you just a quick overview of the list.
Mr. Kaki, I actually was going to ask a question, just going back to your previous slide. I just wanted to note for the enterprise funds, you show expense of, and I know this covers several enterprise funds, but $223 million. And then the revenue is much greater, however, at $280 million. And so I thought maybe you might want to comment for us, or maybe this will come more clear as you go into the individual enterprise funds, why that is so, and how do we then right-size those amounts?
So if I understand the question is with our revenue being greater than the expenses, where those excess dollars go. And I'll look over to our budget director to assist in that, but I think we can get to that as we go through the individual funds.
That sounds good. We'll just put that in the parking lot.
All right. So the way this is, the budget is laid out, obviously we have the 2014, then the 2015 as a comparison, and then we have a separate column associated with enhancements, and so the terminology we're using for enhancements is really kind of new dollars or new requests for dollars in the budget. And as I go through these individually, we'll identify which ones are ongoing funds versus one-time funds. The one other thing, and I'll point this out later also, is where it refers to as transportation planning and programming, that third row. That is a program, not a division. So the terminology gets a little confusing, but I'll point that out later in the presentation. So this is maybe a little bit easier way to look at our general fund expenses in Public Works. As mentioned, the proposed expense budget is $53.7 million. I'm still used to referring to our programs or thinking of our programs as really our cost centers. And so as you take a look at this, you can tell that the snow and ice control is still the largest of the programs that we have. And this slide gives you a sense also about the issue of expenses versus revenues by general fund. And so you can see that in some of our general fund programs, we actually have revenue that covers the entire expenses. For example, in the ramps, we have revenue that backs all the expenses in the ramps. In Public Works Administration, a lot of the revenue comes from enterprise funds to cover our expenses. Special service districts, the SSD is another good example. Those are really just kind of pass-through dollars to cover all of our expenses. But even with the street maintenance, traffic, and snow, we do have revenues to back some of those expenses.
We have a couple of questions. We have first, Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been meaning to ask this question just out of curiosity. Do we bill staff time to capital projects, or do we pay for staff time completely separately from individual projects?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Bender, we do charge to the capital projects, and we do that in a couple different ways. We do direct billings to capital projects, and in some cases we do it through an overhead charge. But if our employees, in most cases, are working on capital projects, the capital project will pay for those expenses.
Thank you. And so do staff generally bill their hours to projects, or do we do it as a percentage of the cost of the project?
Let me make sure I understand your question. Is they, for example, when they're filling out their timesheet, they will have a coding that would go directly to that capital project in most cases. However, I have, for example, managers who are working on multiple capital projects, and then in those cases, sometimes we cover it as an overhead expense and kind of average it out and then charge it to the capital projects in that sense. Okay.
Thank you. We have another question. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mr. Kotke, just quick clarification here. I mean, on the street lighting piece, is it for ongoing maintenance of street lighting, or is it for new projects for street lighting?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, what you see here is the operation of the street lighting, and we have a slide later on that we'll get particularly into that particular program. But these are operating expenses. So if it's new is typically under our capital program. There's some variations. For example, if it's a replacement, meaning something gets hit by a car and we have to put it back up again. But generally, new street lighting is a capital expense.
Okay, continue, I think.
Okay. So now let me kind of get into each one of these programs, as I mentioned I would. The first I want to hit is actually an enhancement or a request of, it's a budget request for $300,000 to cover the cost associated with adding 3.5 FTEs in a new division that I intend to create in 2015 called the Transportation Planning and Programming Division. The key elements of that division will be planning, programming, asset management, and something I refer to as partner agency projects. And the objectives of this new division is to consolidate existing transportation planning and programming work that we do in Public Works that's currently done in 2 divisions to really improve the coordination of that work, give additional focus to these various activities. The particular request, which is $300,000, is really to add some additional resources to allow us to do more advanced planning and more earlier community engagement, and really to allow us to do preliminary concept project development. So let me talk kind of specifically about this, or give you some examples of this. On the right-hand side of the slide, we have this Mark II project timeline, and I've been using this as probably an example of why we want to create this new division and the type of work that we want to do. When we were working on Access Minneapolis, which is our transportation plan, and part of that was what we called our downtown action plan. We really were looking at how we can move transit through downtown quicker. And one of those objectives was to, particularly on the north-south ends, to get traffic and transit moving more efficiently through downtown. And that resulted in a project on Marquette and 2nd to create dual flow bus lanes. The amount of community engagement that we did in early planning that we did literally took a couple years. And it was good work. We got really good feedback. And at the end of that process, though, we had a concept plan that we generally agreed to and that the council adopted. By doing that early work, we were able to, when federal funds came available, which we called Urban Partnership Agreement dollars came available, because it was shovel ready, we were able to move quickly and obtain $35 million of federal money to do that project. And I think the lesson learned for us is that doing this advanced planning and really doing the concept project development work up front is really valuable, and that allows us to have projects that are ready to go out the door when the funding becomes available. Another aspect of this is one of the things that's happening with MAP 21, the new federal transportation program, is that when we get federal dollars now, if a project's not ready to go, we've been able to sometimes get extensions or to the sunsets. They are eliminating those extensions. So if we do not have the project ready to roll when those federal dollars come available, we're going to lose those federal dollars, which I think puts even more importance on that we need to get this advanced planning work done and the concepts of what we're going to build completed earlier on, so we are not going to jeopardize losing federal funding. So just a little more explanation of what I intend to do is, this is our transportation planning and engineering, kind of a simplified org chart of Don Elwood's organization. We're intending to take those elements highlighted in orange there and move them into the new division, which is the planning and programming group that we have today, including asset management. And then in John Wirchus's division, the Traffic and Parking Services, we currently have the Bike and Walk Coordinator as well as our transportation planners supporting the Bike Walk Coordinator, and we're going to move them also into this new division. And so this is what the new division would look like, and we got it kind of highlighted so you can see where people are coming from. The other thing I just wanted to point out here that I kind of glossed over a little bit is that the regional project team, as well as the project management team, these are the people who are overseeing projects that aren't necessarily Minneapolis projects, but are critically important to Minneapolis. Southwest LRT, Botno, Central Corridor, actually even Streetcar, which is a city project at this point, 35 and Lake Street, for example. Large projects that need very active involvement from the city, and this is where these functions would be managed out of. So moving on, this slide is a little confusing, but if you look in the budget book, there is a program called Transportation Planning and Programming. And so what we're going to do is the new division will be partially funded or be fully funded, but using part of these dollars. But there's part of the programming that happens today that will remain in Don Elwood's division, right-of-way permitting and assessments. So in the future, what you'll see is that next year, we'll probably rename this program so that that the transportation planning and programming is actually associated with the transportation planning and programming new division. The other thing I just want to point out on the slide, because this is going to be consistent in some of the other slides that I'll be showing you later on, is on the right-hand side there. So you'll see the dollar amount associated with this program. And then we also highlighted out a revenue associated with it as well. So you can kind of get a sense of if it's $3.3 million expenditure budget, but there's about $0.66 million worth of revenue. So, as I move through the slides, you'll get a sense of that.
Mr. Kaki, so I think we're going to have a few questions, and Councilmember Reich is first in queue, and I have a couple questions as well. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Kaki, I think, highlighted well the advantages of this new restructuring, and I just wanted to emphasize from my perspective, it can't really be underscored the significance of this restructuring and what it can mean for not only this department, but the city itself. As referenced, when we have advanced planning, there's many, many benefits that come from that, and one of the benefits is we will be able to identify and stack benefits from projects that go beyond just strictly their more ostensible transportation purposes. They can be about community building, economic development, more explicitly with advanced planning. And also, I think it lets we have the technical people out there, engaging with folks presently. And when we think of technical people, it's not just their professional credentials that makes them the technical people. They're trained to implement projects. And here we can have advanced planning that puts them in the best position when it's go time for a project that's been vetted, it's ready, and multiple partners and advantages to other benefits from the project that can be gleaned from it are already in place and ready to go. The value of that, I think, is going to be immeasurable over time, and I really applaud the director moving this forward and moving forward in the manner that he has, which has been pretty I imagine behind the scenes, a pretty significant human resource effort, budgeting effort, and all the mechanics that bring us today with the presentation item. So I just wanted to highlight that and reinforce the significance I see in it.
Thank you, Councilmember Reich. And I will say, I'm looking in my budget book for where this is described. Public Works is so big, I'm losing it. I do see the Public Works, Transportation, Planning, and Engineering, but I think that refers to something that previously existed. But generally, I will say, I had heard that this was a proposal that was being developed throughout the year, and I am extremely supportive. In addition to what Councilmember Reich mentioned, I know we probably have some work to do coming up to update our Access Minneapolis plan, or whatever it is called, for the future, and so many regional projects. I had a couple questions. One is about, maybe you could comment on your relationship with of this new division with CPED. And I know there in the past that some positions have been kind of these crossover CPED public works positions and have kind of floated in and out of where they go. But I think almost all those planning positions are now within public works if they touch on the transportation planning. So maybe you can remind me of that. I wanted to know if you thought you were going to hire some additional staff with the additional expenditures, or if that went to other things. It's a large budget for the department, so clearly there's a lot going on. And then my third question is if you can just describe generally, this is why I was looking for the budget book page, is what's the other sources beyond the general fund for this? As Councilmember Bender was asking a previous question, would there be some crossover with supporting capital projects because of, and I think it was on the prior slide, you talked about overseeing some of that
Right.
work that seems to cross over from the pre-planning into when you're actually in the project, so.
Right. All right, I will answer those questions. As far as working with CPED, we actually have a very close working relationship with CPED, and I think our staffs meet daily on initiatives. And the best way for me to describe this, I think some of our transit initiatives that we have going on in the region is a good example. We have our staff, both engineers and transportation planners at the table, but we also have CPED planners. And so we have a tendency to look at more what I call the specific transportation aspects of the projects, where the CPED planners look at more like, say the stationary planning and the elements that really have more of an impact on the surrounding properties. So I think it's a nice complement, but I believe that the staffs, kind of understand their specific roles, and so that's how we typically engage with CPED staff. As far as the staffing, just to clarify, so the $300,000 is a general fund expenditure. In it, I would intend to use all of it for staffing, and maybe just to speak to that in a bit. My intention is to ask actually for $500,000, the general fund, for staffing, for these additional staffing needs in this division. However, working with both the budget office and the mayor, we realized that in 2015, it's going to take us a bit to get staffed up. I'd love to be able to hire people January 1, but that's not how it works. So we kind of looked at prorating what actually our expenses would be in 2015. So the $300,000 is to cover the expenses for 3.5 FTEs in 2015. Assuming that we'll be getting them on, within the first quarter of 2015. So I don't know if that helps understand kind of our use of the dollars. A really good question about, will any of these employees be actually charging their time to capital projects? And I think that, the short answer is, I believe there will be some time charged to capital projects depending on the nature of the project. But one of the things is for example, when we put together capital budget request, that advanced work. The question is whether that's appropriate to actually charge to a capital project that might be funded 5 years from now, or is it really best to have that as a general fund expense as far as kind of project development? And part of the reason of that is the uncertainty of whether that project actually gets delivered. So this is something we work very closely with Sandy and her team on the appropriateness of, it's kind of an issue of the certainty of the project. If there's more certainty of the project, I think it's appropriate then to collect those costs and charge it back to the project. However, we have to be careful. There's a lot of projects and initiatives that we work on that don't become capital projects, then we have to recoup those expenses. So, so I think maybe the answer to your question is it's a bit of a mix.
Okay, thank you. That's so helpful.
Right.
I don't see other questions, so, oh, I think we just got another prompt question. Sorry about that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may be planning this, but I would be curious to understand how those 3.5 FTE fit into the org chart. And then if you could talk a bit more about the skill sets that you see in that group and how it may be the same or different than you have now in the group.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Bender, we've had a lot of discussions about, the needs, and quite honestly, is 3.5 the right number or not, I think is yet to be determined, but I think for this budget, we felt that was the number that we wanted to land on. And the reason I say that is that, I look at, for example, asset management, which is a kind of a low profile thing that we do in public works, but it's critically important, and I think we're understaffed there. Same thing with transportation planning, as well as project management. So the question is for this 2015 is exactly, what positions are we going to hire? I will be hiring a director to oversee this division, so that's a given. What my intentions are, but I wanted to get the director on board, and I think it's important before I make final decisions about the actual positions that I fill in this division, that I get that director on board so that they can make an assessment of where the priorities are. And I think that's really the question. Do I have a higher priority in the transportation planning area, or is it more in the project development, or is it in asset management? And we have some different thoughts on that, but I'm going to kind of leave that decision for a little later until we get the new director on board and make that decision. One of the things that, let me go back to the org chart here. What I'm envisioning is the transportation planning component, that we would hire a position that would really be a senior transportation planner, someone with that skill set to really oversee that entire group. So that may very well be one of the first positions that we hire as well. Just another note I want to make on here is you can see there's a dashed line. The Director of Transportation Planning and Programming will report to Heidi Hamilton, who oversees our transportation business line. But I have put a dash line in from the bike walk team. My conversations with the previous bike walk coordinator, I wanted to make sure that there was a direct connection to me on issues that position deals with. I think it's just important to have a channel to me on those particular issues. So that's something else also that we're going to create in this division. And so I think in the transportation planning area particularly, as far as the skill sets, we have a number of staff who are transportation planners, and they have a variety of backgrounds, but it is particularly more planning related. When we get into the programming pre-project delivery, I think it can be a combination of both planning as well as engineering skill sets. Does that answer your question? All right. Moving on, there was an additional request that we put into the transportation planning program, so this would be incorporated into this new division as well. The Pedestrian Advisory Committee has identified 8 high-risk intersections, and we're in agreement that these need to be studied and look for some kind of improvements, modifications, and so forth. We currently don't have the staff to do this, and so we're asking for $75,000. This would allow us to kind of what I'd say get out of the gate in 2015 and get a consultant on board. $75,000 is probably only going to be able to get us to evaluate one of the 8 intersections that they've identified, but at least it's moving forward so that we can get that work done and at least get it into future capital improvement plans. So now moving on to other programs. Transportation Maintenance Repair Division. So snow and ice control, I mentioned before, that is our largest general fund expenditure program. What's interesting about this particular program or managing this particular budget is we do have a fairly large fixed expense as far as readiness to deal with snow and ice in the city. However, there is a variable aspect of this, and so depending on how much snow we get, our budget can really vary from one year to the next. I'll give you an example. Is a few years ago, so we look at a 5-year average, and that's how we develop our budget. And on a 5-year average, we average about 3 snow emergencies a season. But we have a lot of variation to that. So a few years ago, we had 8, which was a record. We had 8 snow emergencies in one season. And then I think the following year, we had 0, which was also something that hasn't happened to us before. So we get a lot of variation to that. So the best that we can do really is take a look at this budget from a 5-year average. And so 50% of the time, we're probably going to be over budget. 50% of the time, hopefully, we're under budget. We do have an enhancement associated with snow and ice this year that we're excited about. So corner clearings, and what I'm referring to here is where the sidewalks meet the street at the corner. This is an area where windrows, a lot of snow pile up quite heavily, and our current level of service is that we will go and clear out these corners and also at the bus stops when resources are available. But it's not unusual for resources not to be available because of back-to-back snowstorms and other activities going on. So what we're proposing in this budget, that with an additional $200,000, that we're going to establish a new standard, a new level of service. And that new level of service would be that on priority pedestrian corridors, which are the particular corridors that are identified in the city, they're typically the more heavily traveled streets, and that is typically where the buses are all as well, that on those corners, that within 3 working days at the end of a snow emergency and or the accumulation of 4 inches of snow, we will have those corners cleared off, as well as providing an opening for the bus stop. So we're going to remove that windrow so that people can board the bus without having to step over snow piles.
And Mr. Kaki, we do have a question from Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very supportive of this. I did receive a letter from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee saying that they had talked to somebody or heard from someone in the department, the Director of Transportation Maintenance and Repair, that the $200,000 is unlikely to be adequate funding to clear snow from the street corners within 5 days in the pedestrian priority corridors. Do you agree with that assessment? And if so, how much additional would be helpful in order to make sure that we can clear that snow?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I also received that email from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and I responded back to it. I think there was a bit of a misunderstanding as far as what is adequate for what we're proposing versus what is adequate to clear all corners in the city. And I think the Pedestrian Advisory Committee would love it if we could provide this level of service for all corners. But as I clarified, No, this $200,000, and by the way, the person we're talking about is Mike Kennedy, who is our Director of Transportation Maintenance Repair, and he's been working very closely with the PAC on this issue. And that the $200,000 is our estimate of what it would cost us to provide this level of service I just mentioned. I will mention also, and I've talked to the PAC about this as well, is this is a new program, it's a new standard. This is an estimate of what we believe it's going to cost. So we are going to try to achieve this level of service. It's going to take us a little while to get there. We have to probably get some new equipment and figure out what is the, kind of the operationally how we do this. But we'll reassess at the end of the year and see what the costs actually were, and we'll address that in our 2016 budget. But this is the level of service that we intend to provide or work towards for 2015.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that, and I think it's important for all our residents, especially as we have an aging population as well, that we continue to find ways to improve the quality of our streets so that everyone can get around safely. Thank you.
Councilmember Yang, and then I've put myself in queue too for a question.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Director Kaki, with regards to this priority pedestrian corridors term, I mean, do we have a map or a definition of, what that means so that we know exactly, what routes are going to be taken care of in terms of the corners?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, yes, we do. The priority pedestrian corridors were actually developed as part of Access Minneapolis, our transportation plan in the city. So we have maps, they're online, and I'll just look at staff. We will send you a link to that following this presentation so that you have it. But yes, it's very clear. These are very defined routes, and there's a map that identifies where the pedestrian priority corridors are.
Madam Vice President, so you had mentioned, with regards to priority pedestrian corridors, I mean, that's going to be a limited number of corners, but, I guess, to fund taking care of all corners, I mean, what's the cost of that? I mean, do you have an estimate?
We have, Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, we have explored that. Once again, these are kind of estimates, but it'd probably be closer to about $1 million, I believe, is that the number? No, about $1 million.
For all corners in the city of Minneapolis?
That's right.
That's not too bad. I have to tell you, I mean, every time I have to do my corners, it's horrible.
Is that okay? Mr. Kaki, so I wanted to just make sure I'm understanding the funding. Is this ongoing enhancement or a one-time?
Madam Chair, this is ongoing.
Okay, because I remember too, if you can refresh me, yes, that I thought there was an enhancement in last year's budget for corner clearing, and maybe I'm off on my years too. And was that a one-time proposal previously, and then this would be making this permanent? Your staff is shaking their heads, yes. But
yes, Madam Chair, you have a good memory. That is exactly right. It was some one-time funding last year.
Okay, thanks for that. And I appreciate that you're and also appreciate that the mayor funded what I think is a need here. I think this is one of the biggest challenges, frankly, in the city, is that we get to wintertime and a good majority of our population is kind of trapped. And it's a challenge to us as a city, too. I know that you and I have had conversations about this, and Councilmember Reich and others. It's a challenge as a city to identify kind of what's the investment that we could or should do around this, and how does that balance with the responsibility of residents, which is there to do their clearing as well. So thank you for this.
Madam Chair, one other item I want to mention that's on the slide is we've been doing a pilot program for a couple of years, utilizing contractors to deal with people who are not getting their sidewalk shoveled. The process has been in place for a number of years, but the change was, rather than using city forces, which typically are tied up doing a lot of other things, we started using contractors to see how that would work. We think that pilot's been very successful, and so this year we intend to expand that and actually have contract services citywide. You'll see that it is a budget item, but it's somewhat budget neutral. It's about $300,000, but we retrieve those dollars through assessments to the property owners who sidewalks need to be cleared.
Thanks. And just one more comment. There are a couple other folks who are in queue on this. I look forward to us thinking of ways to be more aggressive on kind of moving these items forward, utilizing the contractors. I realize that there have been some issues with, do contractors have the right equipment, based on kind of the fluctuations that we've had in winter time, and then how different it is to remove snow that is with a kind of ridge that's created by a snowplow versus maybe what they otherwise are doing, kind of the hardiness of the equipment that they need to do what we might be asking them to do. But there's others in queue here on this topic, I am guessing. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought this might be a good time to just voice how appreciative I am that this budget reflects input of the bicycle and pedestrian advisory committees. I served on the BAC myself for a while, and these are a group of citizens that either choose or by necessity bicycle and walk in our city, and they're just really dedicated groups of people. I mean, I know all of our boards and commissions are, but I'm just very familiar with these. Both of the groups have subcommittees, so most members of each of these groups attend 2 meetings per month, and then in my experience often spend a lot of time communicating with you and your staff, doing volunteer work to even get out and do pedestrian counts, and so I just really appreciate the responsiveness. I know that this in particular was a very high priority for the pedestrian advisory committee, but all of these things, the staff restructuring, the things you're about to talk about with bicycle maintenance, are things that I know that these groups have been talking about, and it's really nice to see those priorities reflected in this budget, so thank you.
Madam Chair, Councilmember, I agree entirely.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mr. Kotke, this question is actually for the slide before that, but it's about this map. I love the map that you have for the sidewalk snow and ice complaints, and I'm curious, do you have that kind of mapping for general road snow complaints, and are there any decisions being made off of that to improve from prior years?
Well, we can do amazing things with data, and I'm assuming that I'm not sure that map's available.
Without asking
but I would
for
think
more
that
work.
we could create that map.
I would be curious to be able to see and create some kind of plan for that, just from so many complaints coming from certain parts of the city that are different from where we see the sidewalk complaints coming from. Thank you.
And Councilmember Palmisano, again, I wanted to maybe add to that, because I agree it's helpful to do that evaluation of the complaints, but I also think that that may cause us to maybe overlook areas where we don't have as engaged or connected populace that understands 311. And so my preference would be we use this information, which is important and rich, but how do we utilize our staff to do, or others within the city who travel our streets and sidewalks, to give us a good assessment of where the needs are, whether it's on this corner clearing or sidewalk issues or the other things that I know Public Works is engaged in. I will say just to this point that I feel like the model that's been used with solid waste is utilizing the folks that work either for our contractors or with our own forces to report graffiti is just amazing how they have helped work on that issue. Often I get a lot of graffiti complaints, and the majority of them are from staff. So I think there's ways we can utilize our city forces to help with that.
So this is the additional enhancement once again, primarily in the snow and ice budget. And what this is really associated with protected bike lane maintenance and some of the off-street bike system expansion. As we, and Councilmember Bender, to your point, this is good feedback that we got from the Bicycle Advisory Committee as well, is as we expand our protected bike lane system, that means that we have to maintain more, and there needs to be some additional dollars for that ongoing maintenance. So in this case, the mayor recommended another $41,000 to allow us to continue maintaining the protected on-street and off-street bike system. The mayor also allowed us 150, or was recommending 150,000 for us to purchase some specialized equipment, because the bike trails are so forth are narrower, and looking at some better equipment to actually remove and plow the snow on those bike lanes. Okay, so this is one of our base programs, street maintenance and repair. We do a lot of different things out of this program. Probably the ones that are most recognizable is pothole patching and repair, but also the preventive maintenance and the seal coating, crack sealing, which is critically important for us to do that and stay up on that on our streets. Hopefully, the more we can do that, the less pothole repair that we have to do. And then as well as utility cut restoration. The utility cut restoration, just to point to that, on the right-hand side of the slide where you see the revenue budget, that's where a lot of that revenue comes from. We do charge the utilities for going in and repairing their utility cuts. The other thing I just want to mention is on the pothole patching. This is a little bit like the snow budget in that it does vary from year to year depending on the severity of the winter and whether we have a lot of freeze thaw and so forth. So there have been years where we've come to the council, usually in the spring, and say we need some additional funding for pothole repair, but it really varies depending on the weather conditions. We take care of a lot of bridges in Minneapolis. We have 84 vehicular bridges that are our responsibility. Those include the park board bridges. If you were to add in the pedestrian and skyways, that's 105 bridges that we're actually responsible for. The inspection work is actually done out of transportation planning and engineering, but the repairs and the preventive maintenance work is done out of transportation maintenance and repair. Special service districts is also managed out of transportation maintenance repair and is a program. I'm a huge fan of special service districts. I think it's a way of really partnering with the business community to provide a higher level of services in those districts, which I think really benefits all of our citizens as they walk through and utilize those business nodes. We have 13. We're continuing to grow. I think we have 13 city-managed special service districts, and then we have the new self-managed special service district on West Broadway, and that is within this budget. Ramp maintenance and repair. So the ramps, the city's parking ramps are actually managed out of traffic and parking services, but we utilize staff in the transportation maintenance and repair division. And the reason we do that is these employees that do this type of work, utilizing them out of this group allows us some more flexibility with those employees, so that these are field people, public works service workers, that if we need them to do another task, we can do that, and it works from an operations standpoint easier to have these employees in the transportation and repair division. But this is fully funded out of the parking fund for the work that they're doing on the parking ramps. Malls and plazas. So what malls and plazas is, maybe it's an older term, but we have a lot of green space in the city. We have about 200 acres of green space, mini malls, plazas, bike trail maintenance. This is where sometimes we have little intersections and neighborhoods where there's a little green triangle out in the street. Those are the areas that this budget covers, and we do mowing and cleaning, litter collection, those types of things. This is a budget that over the years actually has been one of the budgets that's been cut back. When we had to make budget cuts previous years, this is one area that we look to cut back. And so I think this group has done a really good job at looking at efficiencies and, how to provide this service better. And an example of that, which, I just think our staff has done just an incredible job in Mike's team, is partnering with the communities on these green spaces. So we have the dollars to go out and maintain it and mow it and so forth. But as far as really making these spaces look nicer, we've been partnering with, and I have a list in front of me, but it's a long list of neighborhoods and community groups to really beautify and, make these green spaces nicer. So this is, I think, just a great program that Mike's division has undertaken, and it seems to be growing. So now I'm going to switch over into the Traffic and Parking Services Division and talk about the traffic program. This is the program that is responsible for operating and maintaining our traffic control devices, our 800 traffic signals, our 100,000 traffic signs, pavement markings. This is another area that I want to applaud John Wirchus and his team as far as where technology's really helped us out tremendously here. We found great efficiencies through some new technologies. One of them that you're probably all familiar with is we've been rolling out a new upgrade to our signal system, dealing with both controllers as far as retiming, and that project and that program is almost complete. We have a new traffic management center. With that, allows us to actually monitor and modify traffic signals remotely. So we used to have to send crews out every time we needed to do some kind of modification to a traffic signal. We don't have to do that anymore. They can do that remotely. The other thing that this group has done that I think is a really great efficiency is and this is something I'm going to mention in a number of different divisions, is we have what's called as-built drawings. So that's kind of the layout of what's out in the field. And so when people ask for utility relocate or utility locates, we have to go out and mark all that stuff. Well, that used to all be done in paper. Well, they've converted all that now to electronically, so that now we can use devices like iPads and go out in the field, and we have all that information easily accessible for the people out in the field. We do have an enhancement that request of $350,000. We're referring to it as a transportation system safety improvements request, and it's really focused on our goal to reduce fatalities, both particularly in bicycles and pedestrians, but also as well as in vehicles. And we have a number of initiatives that we'd like to move forward with. This is ongoing. This is not one-time dollars. To give you this kind of a sense of some of the things that Mr. Wirchus is looking at, is a lot of it has to do with making intersections, that we're able to see where bicycles are going to be and need to be, and all as well as pedestrians. So we're talking about durable markings for bicycle conflict areas, crosswalks, pedestrian crossing safety medians, painted and detached curbs. So there's a number of tools that we believe are out there that we can utilize. A lot of this came from, we did do a bike crash study a number of years ago to really identify what intersections are problematic intersections. And so now this is a request to really kind of try to address some of those problem intersections. So street lighting, it's a $6.5 million expenditure budget. About $4.8 million of that is actually just to pay Excel for the lights that they have in the city and the electric bill, so to say. As you can see on the slide, we have 15,000 city lights, but there's about 25,000 Excel wood pole lights that we manage. One of the things I just want to mention here, obviously the big expense here is electrical cost, but we have basically maintenance, bulb and ballast replacement, and pole maintenance. One of the things we're moving towards is LED, and we're looking really closely at this. We're already purchasing LEDs. Where we're going to start rolling out LEDs first is what I call our high wattage lights. So those are what the kind of the shoebox or Cobra lights that you see downtown, and the reason is the wattage on them. That the payback, if we replace those with LEDs, we're going to get a payback in about 3 years on the expense of changing those out. Now, when you get out into the neighborhoods where we have lower wattage or pedestrian level lighting, the payback on those is quite a bit longer. So we'll be focusing primarily on the high wattage light systems first. And I think Mr. Wirtjes is planning to come to council in January sometime to update the council on our entire LED program.
We do have a question from Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mr. Kotke, I think I've heard the answer to this question in the past, and I just don't honestly recall. Can you help me understand, because this picture you have to me looks like a park light. What is our shared relationship with lighting on the parkways or in our parks? Do we have any shared, do we do any of that? I ask because that is some of the places where lighting for safety reasons is particularly important.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, I'm going to look at John and make sure that I'm stating this correctly, and you can shake your head yes or no if I have this right or wrong. Parkway lighting is our responsibility. We've taken that over and we manage that. And so we've been working with the Park Board on upgrading the parkway lighting. I think we've made some great strides, but that is our responsibility.
And then if I may, is that also our expense? Because I saw it on their budget thing 2 days ago.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, yes, that is our expense. We put that in our budget.
Thank you.
Mr. Kotke, just while you're paused, I wanted to go back to the enhancement on the transportation system safety improvements, where you talked about various improvements for bicycle and pedestrian or non-motorized transportation issues. Is that an ongoing enhancement or a one-time?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, the question was?
The $350,000, the enhancement listed on this page, is that ongoing or one-time?
Oh, I'm sorry, that is ongoing.
Thank you.
And then the last general fund program, but certainly not the least important program, is administration. This is the program that both myself and Heidi Hamilton and Brett Jelly work out of. Besides providing department leadership, this group also manages the city's or the department's finances and works with the finance department. It's kind of our liaison with the finance department. We also manage all the personnel issues through this program. And we also have people that work with our employees on safety, which is a huge issue for us, that we want to make sure that our employees are well trained and safe. And so that program is also managed out of administration. I will point out over here on the right that it's a $3.1 million budget, but $2.9 million is revenue from the enterprise funds, because a good portion of the department is actually revenue from our enterprise funds, so that we charge the enterprise funds for the services that we're providing those. So you can see that from a general fund perspective, it's a fairly small amount. So I'm just doing a quick time check, and I think we're right on the mark. So the next portion of my presentation is going to be focusing in on enterprise and capital funds. And once again, when I talk about capital funds, I'm talking about capital fund support, not necessarily the capital budget request. So this is an overview of the enterprise funds within Public Works. Once again, similar to what I did previously, when I go through the different divisions, I'll just list their programs, but I'll go through some of these in more specifics in later slides. So in solid waste and recycling, these are all the programs or activities that that division delivers. And of course, you can see that the one that I'll speak to next is the source separated organics, where we currently have a pilot program with about a $430,000 budget, and we are proposing a citywide organics collection, which is closer to $8.4 million. So let me spend some time talking a bit on the source separated organics program. We made a presentation to the council, I think last spring, and so most of the material I'm going to go over here is material you've already seen, but I thought it'd be good just to kind of refresh your memory about the program. So this is moving really what we've been doing with our source separated organics program and the pilots to a citywide program. And to refresh everybody's memory, when we refer to customers, it's residential customers that live in a unit, a 4-unit resident or less. What we're proposing is an opt-in program, and we're estimating that of about our 100,000 customers that we have, that about 40,000 would participate. We're also talking about rolling this out where the cost of the system, the cost of that would be really applied to all of our rate players, whether you decide to opt in or not. And when I say opt in, that means that if you opt in, you'll get a cart. If you don't opt in, we won't furnish you a cart. But either way, all the rate payers would be paying the same dollar amount. It would be a weekly collection. And then just as a reminder, this is not commingled with yard waste. We're not able to do that at this point. We may be able to do that sometime in the future, but at this point we would not be able to commingle it with yard waste. Once again, as a refresher about what a source separated
Mr. Kotke, Councilmember Gordon has a question. I'm not why don't you go ahead? I just wasn't sure what it relates to.
It's related to this, and could maybe go after the next slide, but I was just curious about when we were hoping to roll the program out next year and the timeline. I think there's been some discussion about that, and there's been some.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I have about 3 slides. It talks very specifically about the timing of and schedule of the rollout. So this really talks about our waste stream here in Minneapolis, and we've had a slide or a pie chart that talks about it without the SSO program and then with the SSO program. And so you can see the changes of going from 61% of our waste stream going to HERC, and with going to a source separated organic program, about 56% of our waste stream will go to HERC. And that's about a 8.8% reduction in the amount of material going to HERC. So let me just talk about the cost of the program. We believe that it's going to be cost about $5.3 million in startup. The carts, we need to acquire about 50,000 carts. And this cart, and let me pause for a minute. As I walk through all of this, one of the things that everybody knows is that we pick up solid waste and recycling with city crews for half the city, and the other half of the city, we have a contractor that, MRI, that picks up solid waste and recycling for the other half of the city. So, so as I walk through there, there's some particulars that are associated with the city, but keep in mind that MRI is going to have to deal with a number of these issues as well, and I'll try to point that out. So getting to back to the startup, so the $50,000 carts is really for the entire city, and the 11 vehicles that we need to acquire, that's only on the city side. MRI would also need to acquire some vehicles. And then as far as the annual operating cost of this, on the city side, we would need to hire about 22 employees to provide this additional service, and also dealing with issues like truck and cart maintenance. That $4.4 million, though, we did make an assumption of what we would have to pay MRI for the additional services that they're going to provide. And so kind of getting into the issue of timing and schedule. The first thing we really need to work on, and we're already kind of gearing up for this, is an education program. You know, rolling out the source-separated organics citywide. A huge effort that we need to undertake right away is the issue of education about why this is a good thing to do, but also what actually, you know, how you do it, what actually goes into your organics collection. We have some things also dealing with, you know, temporary storage of the carts that we're going to be purchasing, dealing with these additional trucks that we're going to acquire, and then a very big issue that we are not overlooking is our conversations with our contractor, MRI. We've already started preliminary conversations with them, but we will need to negotiate a new contract with them. We have a 5-year contract, and I think it's safe to say that, you know, their feeling is they're going to have to make some capital investments in purchasing new trucks. And so I think that, you know, for them, that's an issue. They want to be able to make sure that their contract recoups those expenses. And so whether we do an extension of their contract or how we modify their contract will be something we'll be working on and talking with them on. One of the challenges that we have from a scheduling and rollout perspective, and Councilmember Gordon, I'll get to I think your specific question here, is that we do have to purchase new trucks. Now these trucks are, the good news, these are Packer trucks, so they're the same type of trucks that we use for both recycling as well as solid waste collection, but we do need more trucks. And the lead time on getting trucks is 11 months, which seems like a long time, but when we put in an order, it's literally 11 months before we can get that truck out on the street. So that's really kind of our critical path issue right now, is the delivery of these trucks. Carts for collection, it's about 8 months, so you can see it's a little bit less time to get it rolled out. And then, of course, hiring staff, there's some time frame associated with getting staff on board. So let me make sure I got this in here as far as
We have
specifics.
a question from Councilmember Fry.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kaki, if you could just go to the last slide. I just have a couple questions about the financing of the organics plan. So the $5.3 million in startup and just the initial capital costs, where is that money coming from?
Madam Chair, Council Member, the dollars, all of these dollars would be collected through rates that we charge our solid waste and recycling.
Okay, so it's purely assessments, nothing from the general fund, nothing through our capital fund, nothing through TIF districts or anything else?
No, this would all be through rates charged through our solid waste and recycling customers.
Thank you, that's all.
Councilmember Yang has a question.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. So with regards to the vehicles for MRI, you talked about negotiating a new contract, and so that would just be assumed a part of it. I mean, essentially us mandating that if they can't do the source-separated organics, then we'd find somebody else who'd want to do it, right?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, Yes, I would say that that is correct. I don't foresee that being the case. We work very closely with our contractor, and we've been having conversations with MRI for months. And I think they're fairly optimistic they can deliver this, and I'm confident we'll be able to negotiate an agreement. So.
And with regards to these rates for our residents, so we're assuming that, I mean, when we collect the rates, I mean, the rates will cover all of the costs associated with the startup and the annual cost. I mean, I'm doing the math right now. It's about $10 million, right?
Yes, approximately.
And that would be, I mean, annually, I mean, we'd be able to collect upwards of $10 million, if not more.
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, the annual cost, as we have here, we anticipate to be about $4.4 million, but there is startup cost. We intend to use fund cash to finance a lot of the startup cost. When you look at the rates primarily are associated with the $4.4 million annual expense.
And so what's the anticipated annual, I guess, take from these rates that we're, assessing to people with regards to source separated organics?
In the next slide, I'll get into the particular, what we anticipate increasing the rates to cover these expenses.
Okay.
So, but before I move on, I want to make sure I'm answering Councilmember Gordon's question, because it's a very, very important element, is given the, let's make sure I'm on the right slide. Given the lead time associated with the trucks, we don't anticipate being able to roll out to our first round of customers until about the third quarter of 2015. So we're probably looking at September of 2015. And so what we anticipate in 2015, that we'd be able to roll out this service for about 25% of our customers in the city. And then we would roll out the remaining 75% to the remainder of the city in the spring of 2016. So with the idea that hopefully by June of 2016, we'd have 100% rolled out. So there's going to be a phase in. We can't roll this out in the middle of the winter time, so we have to take a bit of a pause in the winter, but then we'd resume that in the spring.
We do, Mr. Kaki, Councilmember Gordon was in queue, and then Council President Johnson, I'm not sure.
I'm just going to wait for her.
You're going to wait, and she may have a question in a bit. Councilmember Gordon, did you have another follow-up? Or did this answer your question?
So I have a couple questions. One is, how do we determine what 25% then would go first? Have we made that determination yet?
We, Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we have not made that determination of which routes and what portion of our city will get the rollout first. Staff is doing that evaluation, and I'm not sure if I understand all the factors on determining which get rolled out first, but they'll be going through that process here of trying to determine, just like we did with when we went to one sort recycling, what is the best routes to roll out first.
Well, I'll happily volunteer the second ward.
Okay.
My other question is, if we're not going to start the rollout until the third quarter of 2015, is the intention then not to start charging for the service until 2015, or is the intention to start charging in January?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, a good question, and we've discussed that. What we're proposing here is that these rates would actually go into place January of 2015. So, and part of the reason for that is, even though we would not be able to provide this service citywide until the spring of 2016, we will be incurring a lot of expenses in 2015 and early in 2015 as we purchase carts and trucks and others things. So, especially the capital rollout of this, we will be incurring expenses. So that is what we're proposing, is a rate increase that would go into place January of 2015.
I recall last year and maybe the previous year, there was a solid waste reserve fund. We had apparently built up a fair bit of revenue in there. have we talked about potentially using some of that to cover some of these costs? And do you happen to know how much money is in that solid waste? I'm not exactly sure the name of the fund, but I think you know what I mean.
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, we do have some reserve dollars in our, what I call our fund balance for solid waste and recycling. We've been working with finance in the budget office, and so we run what we call performance. And we've been running a lot of variations of those performance, but I think the short answer to your question is we are intending to draw down that cash balance to cover a lot of these capital expenses.
And then I guess my last question for now is there any assistance we're getting from the county? Because the county actually was really well, I have two questions related to the county. One is, are they going to think that the third quarter of 2015 is actually kind of meeting what they passed? They passed a formal resolution, and I think they said January, and so they wanted the beginning of the year, clearly something to happen. I testified in front of the committee and got the impression that it was actually, as long as we were making significant strides in the direction of rolling it out. Whether or not they'll see this as a significant stride, probably that's one indication why saying we're charging for the fee early shows we're really serious, but hopefully they will. But I'm just curious if you've had further discussions at all with the county about it. And then also they talked a lot about, and they wanted us to go in and lobby for state funds to help us with this and help with get organics rolling out. And have they followed through with getting some funds to assist us in getting this rollout going?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Gordon, yes, I've been having lots of conversations with the county about this issue. First on my understanding, it sounds like this as well as yours, is even though they indicated they wanted the city to roll it out by January 2015, they understand exactly as what I just told you about our schedule for rollout. I think the thought is yes, we're moving forward, we're making progress, and they're comfortable with that. And particularly, I think what our concern was is we do get something called score dollars. It goes from the state to the county, and then they distribute it to us. And the dollar amount is approximately, $800,000. And so the question is, would that be in jeopardy if we didn't have it rolled out in January of 2015? And the response I'm getting back from the county staff is no, it is not. So I think they're comfortable with how we're proceeding with this, and it won't jeopardize our score dollars. As far as the county assisting us in getting this rolled out, I've had those conversations with them as well. And I'm not sure what the particular dollar amount is, but I know that they're very interested in contributing and helping us with the education campaign, because I think they'd like to see some consistency about how we're educating our citizens about organics with how they intend to educate other people in Hennepin County about organics. So I think they're very interested in participating and assisting in the education component. Now, there's another issue that you brought up that is all the dollars that they collect, the state collects that we refer to as score dollars are not necessarily distributed back. And I think it's actually maybe we only get back 50% of what we contribute in score dollars. The county feels that's inappropriate, and as we do, and have been lobbying at the state that more of those dollars be made available to turn back to the cities to help them in their recycling efforts. And it's my understanding they were partially successful this last legislative session, and so there's more score dollars available than there were the previous year. But they're continually working to try to get that dollar amount up from what it is today. My conversations with the county staff, so this is county staff, this is not a county board action, is the question about distribution of those additional funds down the road to cities. And so right now, I think the score money is divided up by a number of people participating in recycling. I think what they would like to do is say if you're also collecting organics, that would count as 2 so that Minneapolis, on a proportion, if we went to citywide organics, would actually receive a larger portion of the score dollars, because for every household that's doing both one sort recycling as well as organics, that would count as 2 participants. So this is what the county staff is going to be recommending as far as a formula to the county board about how they should distribute score dollars in the future.
And just finally then, are we thinking that these score dollars could be used to support our source separated organics program and potentially either reduce what we would have to take from our reserve funds, or could maybe be put into some kind of equation to reduce the fee the first year?
Councilmember Gordon, yes, I think when we have some flexibility, it would be, the formula I mentioned that the county staff is recommending would help identify how much money the city of Minneapolis gets. How the city of Minneapolis uses those dollars, we have some discretion on that. And I would assume, though, we would want to use that to help offset the expenses associated with organics collection and potentially reduce the amount that we're charging our citizens.
So that could be something the council could give some guidance to over the budget process. Thank you.
So let me talk about the proposed rates. The way we charge our residential customers in Minneapolis is we have a base fee, and this year it's $17.60. Of course, no one gets just the base fee. You have to decide if you want a small cart or large cart, and you can see there's a difference in that. Most of our households do use large carts, and when we're referring to large carts here, these are our solid waste large carts. So our average customer rate right now is $22.60. With the organics program rolled out, we're recommending that be modified to the $21.60, or with a cart, a large cart, it'd be $26.60. Now, if you decide to opt in, and as a result of opting in, you are producing less solid waste, there may be an opportunity that you can move from a large cart to a small cart. So if you could perhaps offset that by $3, if that works. The amount of the increase, so it's a $4 increase. About $3.40 of it is associated with organics. So the lion's share would be associated with organics collection. But the other 60 cents, we have some other expenses that we're incurring dealing with mattress recycling and some other expenses that we need to cover. So, but the bulk of it is associated with organics collection.
I'm sorry, Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you're the engineering, you're math people. This is like about a 25% increase. Am I to the base? $4 to the base? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Somebody get me that number. That really is got a calculator. That'd be helpful. I'd like that. Thank you.
Oh, it's on the next slide. All right. There we go. So what I wanted to show here, because I just felt this was very important, is that to show what we are proposing as far as a 5-year rate program. And you can obviously see the rate that you're adopting is 2015, but like our other enterprise funds, typically you adopt a plan for rates. So it gives you a sense of what with our performance, what we're anticipating for rate increases in the out years. And so you can see that it's, I guess, a 17.7% rate increase from in 2015. But there are a couple of higher rate increases in 16 and 17 as well. And what those are associated with is we need to replace our solid waste and recycling operations facility. It's up at 2710 Pacific. It's kind of hit its useful life. We've been working with property services on our options associated with that, and their recommendation is that we replace the facility. This has been through CLIC in our capital program, so we've been programming this facility replacement for a number of years, and so these rates that you see not only reflect the rolling out of citywide organics, it also reflects the cost associated with the replacement of that facility that we need to replace.
And Mr. Kaki, before you move forward, so we have a question from Council President Johnson, and then I've put myself in queue, and we also have Councilmember Yang after myself. So Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, Mr. Kaki, if memory serves me, we've had years, many years without any increases at all in our solid waste charges. And so I would like to see a chart that would be 6 years back, showing what increases are flat that we've had. That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. That was actually one of my questions as well, to kind of see that previous history. Another just question that I had is whether we think there is anything that is not today reflected in these rates that could influence them. And I'm not saying that is likely. I just wanted to know if there has been any thought about other things that could happen that could influence the rates either up or down. I know, as an example, that we had a lot of conversation last year at the legislature about the SCORE funding with only pretty minimal changes. So I'm not, again, suggesting that there are major things on the horizon, but I just wanted to know how we're thinking about that or other options.
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of other things that could impact these rates, what I'll call negatively. I think we've taken a relatively conservative approach to this. For example, one of the unknowns is the exact cost of what this new facility would be, but I think we've taken a relatively conservative approach to that. Other things that could impact us, of course, is, HERC tipping fees and those types of things, but we're fairly comfortable that we're forecasting appropriately on that. Of course, if we are able to be successful in getting more of those SCORE dollars back to the city, that would have a positive impact on these rates. So I'm fairly comfortable these are conservative rates.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Director Kaki, I had asked this question a little bit earlier, but with regards to the annual revenue or the collections from the source-separated organics by themselves, I mean, will the program essentially pay for itself in terms of, all the startup costs and the annual?
Madam Chair, Councilmember, no, I'm not sure there's any revenue source from the organic collection itself. So no, there's not a revenue source that would offset the cost of these expenses.
Okay, and how about in terms of the amount of money that we collect or assess, to the residents? I mean, how much annually would we get from that? That little spike, that's what, like a $4 spike per household. Annually, how much would we get from that?
Councilmember, could you restate your question? Make sure I'm understanding.
What I mean by that is that, if we're going to just, mandate that, all of Minneapolis eventually get to this point where we're doing source-separated organics along with, the regular solid waste and things like that. I mean, the increase, per household, it's going to be about $40 or $44 increase per household. Is that correct?
The increase per average household for moving towards the organics program is about $3.40 a month.
Okay. So, roughly about, $40 or so. And so, how many households are in Minneapolis that we collect from? And
approximately 100,000.
Okay. So, so I'm going to ask this question. I mean, so what if we don't do this at all? I mean, what are our options there? I mean, my understanding is that we're going to have to pay, you know, $800,000, I guess, amount to the county, but is that it, or what else is there?
Madam Chair, Councilmember Yang, no, I think you have it correct. What we wouldn't pay, we just would not receive. I think that's the implied message that we're getting from the county. If we don't move towards citywide organics, that they would withhold our score money. Now, whether that means 100% of our score money, they didn't articulate that. But I would assume in worst case scenario, if it's 100%, we would, you know, and of course the score money is going up, so it'd be anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million less revenue coming in.
Okay. And Councilmember Yang, you're complete. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Kotke, I'm not sure that we have this information, but can you help us understand? I feel like to an average household, there are other fees going on here. So do we know what the true cost is of the HERC, say, to the average household? One of the costs of not doing this is that I do suspect that those costs to the environment, to everything, goes up over time a lot more significantly than we represent at the city level. And what I think is potentially the greatest argument for this program is getting more waste out of the HERC. Now, I know the HERC is partially subsidized, so we pay a $40 per ton tipping fee, but the actual cost is more than that. And the average household does pay more to that through Hennepin County, correct?
Madam Chair, as far as your property taxes that you pay to Hennepin County, what portion of that goes to the HERC facility? I don't have the answer for that. But there is a point here that I want to make sure that, at least from this is my understanding, is our waste to energy facility, or the waste to energy facility, HERC, has a certain capacity. And I believe that the county intends to use that capacity so that when we roll out the system, City of Minneapolis will bring less solid waste to HERC. However, I think what the county intends to do then is bring in solid waste from other haulers to maximize, to keep that capacity at HERC at where it is today. But the end result would be there would be less solid waste going into landfills elsewhere in the region.
Thank you. It's something I want to dig into more, but that's not for this conversation.
Okay, Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess, Mr. Kotke, you kind of got to, what's driving this whole decision. And my thoughts is that, the county wanted to increase has the authority to increase the amount that they burn at the HERC. But the city, the votes were here to allow the conditional use permit, which was a hang up. And so the county is essentially saying, Minneapolis, it's a bit of a throwing a grenade at us. We threw a softball over there. They're throwing a grenade back at us and saying you need to implement organics collection. And in the end, the amount of garbage being burned at the HERC isn't going to change at all. It's just that less garbage will be put into landfills totally across the county. The other thing I want to point out is, SCORE funding, and I think I'm right when I say this, SCORE funding doesn't come from the state of Minnesota. It comes from the garbage system. So we're paying for this SCORE funding that is coming back to us in a diminished amount. The state keeps some of it for the general fund, and the county keeps it and then funnels it to us. So all of the money for solid waste, actually solid waste treatment, comes out of the fees that people pay to have their garbage picked up.
Thank you. And I'm not seeing other questions on this topic. I think we knew this would generate a significant amount of conversation. I want to acknowledge that Councilmember Quincy has been able to rejoin us, and I will turn the chair back to him.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Glidden. Apologize for being late, but I think it was a productive conversation from this point. So I'm going to just suggest Mr. Kotke continue.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll move on, and according to my schedule here, I think we're close to being on time. So I'm going to move on to some other enterprise funds. The next one is water treatment and distribution. On all these, I want to also put some slides in here to make sure, not just for yourselves, but maybe for the listening public, a bit about the work that we do in these different divisions. So water treatment and distribution, we operate out of 2 treatment plants, one in Fridley, one in Columbia Heights. You can see we produce and treat a lot of water, 57 million gallons a day on the average and 20 billion gallons a year. It's a big, big operation. We also have a very large distribution system of over 1,000 miles of pipe. And I think you all probably know, we actually sell water to 7 other cities, as well as the Minneapolis or the Metropolitan Airport. So. This is our recommended expense budget for water treatment and distribution for 2015. Some of the cost drivers that we have are associated with chemical and electrical cost going up. Some other things that we're just paying attention to is Columbia Heights. We have a new ultrafiltration plant, of course, there, but we also utilize our old plant as well, and we're looking at having to make some modifications to that plant, so that's something we're planning. Condition assessment, this is something that's going to be kind of a common theme through a lot of the enterprise funds that I'm going to be mentioning, is that we have a lot of infrastructure, and understanding the condition of that infrastructure and then understanding when to make the improvements that we need to make is critically important. We only have so many dollars, so we want to make sure that we're spending those dollars in the right place and really kind of understanding the risk management of where we're spending those dollars. So Glenn Garrett's, our director, is very engaged in not just the condition assessment, but really asset management and making sure that we're going to be making the right decisions at the right time. The other thing that we're actively working on is our Fridley filter plant. It's an older plant, and we're upgrading it right now. And one of the things I'm kind of pleased to talk about is one of the issues that we've had in the past with Minneapolis water in the spring. Sometimes we have a taste and odor issue. Staff has done a remarkable job. Some of this is working with the University of Minnesota, just as far as treatment processes and techniques to really lower the taste and odor complaints, and we have lowered those complaints considerably. But as we upgrade these filters, the other thing that we're going to be doing is putting in an activated carbon filter system, which should pretty much almost eliminate the taste and odor issues, which, good news on the horizon. And then similar to what I mentioned in traffic, our distribution system, they have digitized all the field data so that really our field crews now, as they go out, they have that information electronically. They use iPads, and we're not having to carry reams of paper with as-built, so we can more quickly look at and understand where those field assets are at. So this is the 5-year proposed rates for water. My goal a few years back was to try to keep our rate increases under 5%, and you can see they're doing a good job at that. It's about 3%, 3.3 for 2015, and moving forward. These, as I mentioned before, this is an enterprise fund, so all costs associated with this most of it's all through our ratepayers, and this covers all of our expenses, including debt service on capital expenses, and looking out 10 years on future capital expenses. So this is all inclusive. Moving on now to the sanitary sewer program, similar to water. It's a lot of assets here. We have 820 miles of sanitary pipe. We have a lot of sanitary tunnels, as well as lift stations. Our recommended budget for 2015 is $56.8 million. as you probably know, we don't treat the waste. That is done by Met Council. So 35.3 million of this 56 million is actually a payment to Met Council for treatment of waste. We're assuming a rate increase of 7.9% from Met Council. That number does vary, so I think we're waiting for them to kind of finalize that. If that gets finalized before you pass the budget in December, we will let you know, and that might have an impact on our rates. But at this point, this is what our assumption is. As I mentioned before, and I won't go into in great detail, we're also very much into condition assessment. One of the things I had mentioned last year is that Lisa Cerny's group has been doing more and more of is televising our sewer lines. And I think someone asked me, well, what channel would that be on? Well, we don't broadcast that, but it does allow us to really understand the condition of our assets there. The other thing I wanted to mention too, because there was an article in the paper about inflow and infiltration and Met Council seeking dollars from cities about, those inflow and infiltration rates higher than what they think is reasonable. I think we're in a good place. A number of years ago, we were on that list, and we actually were required to be spending so many dollars on inflow and infiltration. I think we were spending close to $5 million a year on that. However, we have really, with the work that we've done in the previous years, have satisfied Met Council that they think we're in a good place. And so we're continuing to do that. We're continuing to work on improving and when we improve our system, it also improves the inflow and infiltration issues. But we are no longer concerned about being in penalty with Met Council on this issue. So I just want to make, because I think the article in the paper wasn't clear that we are not subject to any penalty from Met Council at this point with inflow and infiltration. This is the rates that we're proposing for the sanitary sewer for the next 5 years, with 3.7% being our 2015 proposed rate. Our stormwater system, once again, it's a large system, and I won't walk through all these items here, but it's a large infrastructure, and if you ever would like an opportunity to go visit a storm tunnel, we have our tunnel project happening again this winter, so we can arrange tours. A couple things I just want to point out that you may be familiar with or perhaps not. Our street sweeping or street cleaning operation, actually Mike Kennedy manages that. However, it's paid for out of our stormwater fund. And the premise of that is if we clean our streets and get the leaves off the streets and so forth, that prevents those materials from getting into our waterways. And so it was decided a number of years ago that that expense, that cost would be funded through our stormwater fund. The other things I have highlighted here, I just want to mention is we have a lot of storm pond, and one of the cost drivers that we have is dredging of those. And the reason I wanted to mention this, I think it's important that years ago we used to deal with just what I call the quantity of water when it rained. The issue of flooding, which is preventing the areas from being flooded. But that's just part of our mission. Right now, it's also about the quality of the water, in that we want to make sure that the water going into our lakes and streams and creeks are clean. And so as we put these devices in, whether it's storm ponds or rain gardens or other things, there is a maintenance expense associated with that. So this is one of the things that we keep in mind as we're working on our budgets, is that as we do more work to really improve the quality of our stormwater, there is a maintenance expense associated with that. The other thing that this may sound a little strange is pipe cleaning. Pipe cleaning, we typically focused on our sanitary system, but Lisa has been televising now our storm sewer lines, and we realized that we actually have some storm pipes that are not able to take really the capacity of the design of the pipe because they've filled up with sediment and sand. And so now we'll have crews going out without having to put any additional pipe in, just really cleaning that out, and it brings back that capacity of that system. And here's the good news, is that we are predicting a 0% increase in our stormwater rates for the next 5 years. And the reason we're able to do this is that a few years back, when we were looking at, we did an assessment of our storm tunnels. And quite honestly, it was very concerning. Our storm tunnel system was in a very poor condition. And we were really concerned that we might have kind of a catastrophic issue. And so working with finance, we built up a fund balance to make sure that we had adequate funds to deal with a situation that could arise with our storm tunnels. But through further work that Lisa Cerny's team has done, is we've looked at, and we've developed a plan now. It's a 10-year plan to deal with our storm tunnels. They've discovered ways of making improvements that are less expensive. And so the bottom line is now that we feel that we can cover our expense increases. So we are going to have expense increases, so our appropriation in the stormwater fund will be going up each year, but we think we can cover that with our fund balance, and we're going to draw that fund balance down to a more reasonable, what we consider reasonable level. So the result of that is we're recommending a 0% increase in rates. So I think this was a question somebody asked. Here's a summary of our rate impacts to what we call our average residential customer in the city of Minneapolis. And you can see broken down into sanitary, storm, water, solid waste, and then what the total would be. And so I think if you do the math for an average resident, including moving towards organics, it would be about a $5.60 a month increase. All right, so let me move on to, I think our last enterprise fund is our parking system. So the parking fund, our parking system, which is what Public Works manages, is part of the parking fund, but the parking fund includes more than just the parking system. So I'm not going to speak extensively about the parking fund. I think finance is better suited to speak about the parking fund as a whole, but I'll be speaking more about the parking system. So we own 13 parking ramps. We actually manage 16 because we manage the 3 state ramps, what we call the ABC ramps over on the 3rd Avenue distributor. We have 5 parking lots. We have 630 multi-space meters. Of course, those are our new meters that we've rolled out recently. This parking system, we manage the impound lot, and of course now we're also managing the car sharing program. Just real quickly, some trends, challenges, initiatives. What's interesting about our parking system, the parking ramps particularly, the amount of revenue, it's very market driven. When we have vacancy rates downtown that are going up, our revenues drop in our parking system. As the economy turns around, which it seems to be doing now, and the vacancy rate actually goes down, we see an increase in revenue. So it does, our revenue stream with our parking system does fluctuate. We have issues that these are large facilities and have needs. Customer service is very important. We're in a market. We need to compete with the private sector on the, attracting people to park in our facilities. Technology has been a big driver in this the area as we move to automated parking and so forth. Some initiatives John Wirch's team has going on is to continue on with the car sharing program, pay by phone with the on-street parking system, which I think you saw at a council presentation here recently. We're very interested in getting some facility improvements done at the impound lot for our customers. And then just to really understand the capital asset and repair program for our parking facilities. The expense budget for both our on-street parking, off-street parking, and the impound lot. So the revenue stream from this is not general fund. It's through a variety of sources. What people pay for their on-street meters, what they pay to park in the off-street ramps, and then what the cost associated with having your car impounded. So I'm getting near the end here, and so I should be able to wrap this up in 10 minutes. The last fund category I want to talk about is internal service funds. One of the important and larger operations that we have in Public Works is fleet services. So we manage the acquisition and maintenance of all city rolling stock. So that includes police squads as well as fire trucks and Public Works. So we have 1,800 rolling stock. This fund also manages the fuel use in the city, both diesel as well as gasoline, and also the maintenance and repair of all these vehicles. We have the fleet program divided in, well, actually the fleet fund broken into 3 programs. Fleet management, which is primarily about acquisition and resale of our fleet. Fleet coordination, real quickly on this, this used to be a larger dollar amount. All the drivers and operators in the city used to be based here, and we would dispatch them out to all the different groups in Public Works. We are moving away from that now. Most of those people now have become Public Works service workers, and now we reside actually in the operating divisions, but we still have a component that we need here, particularly associated with like rental equipment and so forth. And then the fleet maintenance operations, which is our staff that maintains our fleet. I just want to mention something here that I was talking to our director, John Scharfbillig, about, is we have mechanics that work for us that maintain all this stuff. And we have vacancies, and we're trying to hire mechanics, and it is very difficult to hire mechanics. They're just very sought after, and we're having a hard time competing with the private sector on hiring mechanics. So John is exploring a program where we're actually going to be kind of growing our own. We're reaching out to some Minneapolis schools and through the Step Up program and others, and we're going to create kind of a mechanic trainee position. And hopefully we can, find individuals who would be interested in doing this as a career, and that we can help them move forward and get through some tech school, and hopefully end up having them as a city employee. So that's, I thought, a kind of exciting initiative that John is pursuing. Another internal service fund that most people are probably not aware of is our construction management group. For those that know Mr. Paul Ogren, this is a group that he manages. It's an internal service. They do what they call construction inspection, our lab testing, surveys, all that, and really supporting our capital work, our implementation of our capital work. I want to give some kudos to Paul here also. He has done a really great job on cross-training his employees so that we can use them for a variety of things, whether it's lab testing or surveying, or actually as a kind of a technician in the office in the wintertime. So he's done a great job on cross-training his workforce. And last, once again, this is not our capital request, this is our capital program. And so this is all pretty much 4100 fund capital supported expenditures. So these are not general fund expenditures, but these are programs that we have in place that actually support the capital work that we do, and primarily is paid out of the 4100 fund. And so, for example, the work that we do on our sidewalk program is located in this particular fund. And lastly, this is the last one, special service districts, the downtown, the DID, their expenses actually flow through public works. So when you look at our total budget, about $6.1 million of it is actually associated with the downtown improvement district. This is really pass-through dollars. We assess for it, comes through the city, and then we distribute it back to the DID for the work that they do. Madam, or Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kotke. Not seeing any current questions on the previous covered topics, so I'm thinking we're at an end. And thank you very much for you, for your staff, and for all the public service workers who are out there on the roads doing all this work, for presenting a budget recommendation. So thank you very much for your work. I think that concludes our business for today. So we'll take up business later this afternoon as we talk about the police department. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We are adjourned for the morning.